Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Tapcaf Transmissions, this Star Wars podcast you are currently listening to. I am Corey. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, EckhartsLadder, Justin, who does not believe I'm Corey based on that face he made. What was that? Was that a smile? Was that a grimace? I don't know.
It was a smile, yeah. It was my overwhelming happiness to be joined by one of my top 5 best friends, Corey.
Can you just do me a favor and never make that face again, then?
Yeah, I can try.
All right. Well, tonight, how are you doing with Star Wars? Is that a thing that you're enjoying right now?
Yeah, I definitely think I'm enjoying. How about you, Corey?
I too am enjoying Star Wars, even though apparently I'm not really enjoying YouTube's time with Star Wars right now. But
no, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So today we are going to be talking about Andor episodes 1 through 3, which just aired this week. Is it aired the right word? So I think it is. We'll go with it.
Yeah, we're made public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes it sound really bad.
Yeah.
Breaking news. New Andor episodes were made public today. Disney is yet to respond. But we also, on top of the first 3 episodes, we have been able to see episode 4, so we might give a few quick thoughts on that. No major spoilers or anything.
We'll do that at the very end.
Yeah, so don't worry about it if you don't want to be spoiled on that. We will not be talking about it, unlike every plot detail from Legends when we're doing a Legends review. So hold the reviews for that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else newsworthy that we want to talk about before we get into episode 1 and 3? 2 and 3?
I don't think so. Crescia Station from Crystal Star was mentioned in a Star Wars canon comic. Okay. So our Lord and Savior Waru is just sliming around on there, just ready to be brought back into the fold, which is nice, I assume. Other than that, I don't think there's been a whole lot, really. Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about how we need to start some podcast drama between us and other Star Wars podcasts.
Yeah. I always read on Twitter these other Star Wars podcasts who are doing what I'm doing now, where they're like they talk shit about other ones without actually saying their name. Not us, because we're not in. There's like a full circle of like these podcasts that we're just not in. And
that's why we're never on any of them.
Yeah, and I just always see them taking shots at each other. I'm like, I think you guys care more than like the listeners do.
Well, I said I thought jokingly that the only person I was going to beef with was you, because you gave Crystal Star an S+, which I thought I was joking about. But then your next tweet was about Crescia Station and Waru, so... Is that even the right book? Yeah, that's the right book.
Yeah, yep.
Okay,
yep.
Sick.
I would know that because I gave it an S+. S+.
Which is weird, because that's not a rating that we can give on the show. So that was... Yeah, that was a big move for you.
Yep. I just, when something comes that requires the rules to be changed, we change it.
There you go. That's why we're the bad boys of Star Wars podcasting.
That's right. That's why no one wants to start beef with us, because they just know that like we've got Waru and the Anti-Force on our side.
It's like Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
Yeah, exactly.
No one listening is going to know what that is unless we have listeners our age or older. We must.
I assume we must. Yeah.
But Andor, I guess, nothing else that's happened.
No, I think that's pretty much it.
There was the Galaxy's Edge VR game announced, but I can't play it, so I don't really know anything about it.
I think it's kind of just a remaster as well of an existing game, so...
Yeah, it's like what was that game? The Vader thingy?
Yeah, I don't think it's Vader Immortal, the other one, right? Is it Vader's Fortress? I don't know, but yeah.
No, Vader... I thought Vader's Fortress was the lore channel, and then Vader Immortal was Theory's fan film or something, but I might have...
No, Vader Immortal is the name of the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways.
But I don't think it's that one. I think it's a different one. Anyway, let's move on. This is boring. Let's talk about Andor, the big news. We got 3 episodes of Andor. I don't think... They didn't get titles, did they? Or did they?
I think they just got titles. They didn't have them... And maybe the person I saw was just making them up. But I did think it was weird that they didn't have titles and they weren't called like Chapter 1, 2, and 3 like the Mando and Boba Fett stuff was. But...
I'll look now, because I don't think I'm pretty sure Kenobi may have skipped the chapter titles as well. Oh no, there was. So the episodes names were
Casa, The Reckoning, and That's what she said for the middle one?
That would be me was the middle
Oh,
one, and then
not that's what
Reckoning
she
was
said.
the last one.
My bad.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So first of all, I want to say this has been a fun one because reaction across the board has not been totally positive, but I'd say it's been mostly positive, about as positive
Yeah.
as you can expect, right? And not only has it been positive, but there's a lot of people who are really, really into it, which I kind of figured would be the case after having watched the first 4 episodes,
Yeah.
especially the first 3.
Yeah, like so I rewatched it with Dana because I feel like this is the first of the Star Wars shows that she'd be interested in as a not really a Star Wars fan. Like her seeing Cad Bane fight Cobb Vanth wasn't really going to do anything
Does
for her.
nothing, yeah.
But she likes the kind of spy elements and everything. So I think
Yeah.
I thought it'd be good for her to watch. So I watched it alone when we had the early access stuff, and then yesterday I watched through the first 3 again with her, and it did feel a bit slower the second time through because like I kind of knew what was happening. I didn't need the build up as much, and I think she felt it was a bit slow as well. But I don't think it's like that seems to be the biggest complaint with the first few episodes is that they are slower, but I think they're properly paced, and I think the payoff in episode 3 is what really gets you. So there are probably some people out there who might have dropped it after the first episode, but I really think you got to stick with it through those first 3 to really appreciate it.
I do also want to note on that there's been like a bit of I'm just gonna say elitism about people, not you because I think you put it well, but there are people who are like, oh, you think this is slow, wait till you watch actual art and actual TV. It's like, listen, some people have different expectations for what they want out of a Star Wars show, and I can understand the complaints about being slow, and they would have been magnified by 100 had they done a 1 episode a week release. I think having the 3 episodes, because they do kind of form a bit of a mini arc, having 3 was definitely the best thing they could have done.
Yeah, that's been one of the things that's bothered me the most is the kind of weird, this is Star Wars for adults, and like definitely that elitism feeling. In my review, I called it like kind of pretentious, like the way some of that gets discussed, and I didn't refer to it specifically as that being discussed that way, but there was some term that was being used a lot, and I referred to it and said that was pretentious. Like just seeing so much of the this isn't for the Baby Yoda crowd, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they're
I'm
different
the Baby
things.
Yoda crowd.
Yeah, we are all Baby Yoda. Like it's all going to appeal to different people different ways. And there was a thing that I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast when it came out, but there was the thing Mark Ruffalo said about Marvel shows all being different or Marvel movies all being different, and Star Wars you get the same thing every time. And honestly, I think there was he had more of a point than not with how the tone and a lot of it works. Where leaving aside anything about Marvel, with Star Wars at least, a lot of the shows have kind of fit into the same mold, and like especially Book of Boba Fett with Mando, and even Kenobi kind of fit into that same overall feeling, where it was somewhat different, but like when you were within all the live action stuff before, it was a lot more similar. And I do like I said this about Acolyte before, especially when we got all the shows announced, is that I like the idea that Star Wars can be used as this universe to tell these different types of stories in different genres. And I hope I don't want Andor to be taken as because I like Andor, I want everything to just be Andor now.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, it's like I don't find the need to I think it's fine to like a show on its merits and not like another show on its merits, but like to say that this is the way it should be, or like this is the only thing that's been worthwhile, or that like the people that like this are surface level. That's just crappy.
Yeah, and one other thing that I've seen a bit that it kind of relates to something you've talked about a lot recently, where I've seen it described as like this is the closest we'll get to a George Lucas Star Wars show, as if like being good is how you get into the George Lucas realms. Like, I don't think George Lucas would ever really make a show like this.
No,
and that there's a lot of people talking, and the talking is nice. And George Lucas doesn't see himself as a guy who writes talking very well. So that's not going to be what he focuses on. And it's kind of the same thing of like the debate over like does George Lucas determine canon? How did George Lucas feel about Legends versus because he sold it? Does that mean now Lucasfilm has replaced George Lucas and that's what determines canon? Like it's just
Mhm.
such a weird way to frame every discussion that just there's no point to it. I don't understand it.
No, I agree. And it's a waste of time as well. Yeah, it's like the discussion. Like I appreciate that people are talking about it, the people that like this people like this show and are going to bat for it. I'd rather that over the
Yeah.
kind of feeling for Kenobi when a lot of people just felt kind of apathetic about it.
Hmm.
So I'm glad about that, but it's just like let's calm down. Like I saw other people saying like how like this is the only show that's been marketed properly. It's just like
That's
what are you
not
talking
true.
about? Like Star Wars is like yeah. Anyway, just just let's talk about the show. Let's talk about the show. And I think we're both kind of we both really liked it. Is this
Yeah.
your number one Star
Uh,
Wars show?
yeah, I think this takes number one for me. I was thinking, like it was either this or Mando after my first rewatch or after my first watch
Mm-hmm.
through, and I thought I'd have to give it another try because I might just be too close to it right now and getting some recency bias in there.
Mm-hmm.
But even compared to Mando season one, this was the first time that I went back and rewatched one of the shows so quickly and still really enjoyed myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like it fits what I want a lot more closely, and so I think I do have it above even
All
Mando.
right, well, that's great. There is a lot of depth to it, and there's kind of I think a lot of understated like world building and stuff like
Yeah,
that. That's not there's less scenes, you know, straight up where it's like, oh, look at this thing we built. Like in the Book of Boba Fett has that scene with the ring, you know, it really shows off. This, you know, there's lots of little like the set dressing is all phenomenal, and if you stop and rewatch the thing, there's really a lot to notice.
yeah,
Which is great. Um, and, and yeah, I mean the acting is by far my favorite thing about the show is how great all the secondary characters are.
yeah.
I really love Bix. That's kind of there seems to be a bit of romantic tension between her and Cassian. Maybe not though, but she's Cassian's friend either way.
You were
I
telling
really
me like when you were watching it, you messaged me like you were the number one Tim stan as well.
no, not the number one Tim Stan. I do think people are being a little too harsh on Tim, which I guess we'll talk about in a minute as well. But I really like Cassian's friend Bix. I really like his other friend. I can't remember his name. The construction worker.
Gasso something.
Yeah, Gasso. And my favorite, and I think a standout for a lot of people, has been the new. I don't even know his name. The new.
Luthen.
No. Kyle Solar's character.
Oh, Karn.
Karn, yeah. Yeah, Kyle or Karn, yeah. What's his name again? Why am I forgetting his name?
The actor's name?
No. His name is Kyle Solar in real life, but his what's his character's name again?
It's Karn, isn't it?
Cyril Karn. It's Cyril
Yeah.
Karn. You combine the two names. Yeah.
I said Karn the first time.
But it's not Karn, it's Cyril. I think you said Sarn. Okay. Anyway. Yeah.
No, that's the Grand Moff.
But yeah. So he's my favorite, even though I can't remember his name. Doesn't matter. He's an interesting character.
Yeah.
And you know, it's nice that the character who's my favorite is not like, oh, this is Luke Skywalker. You know him from this
Yeah.
other thing.
You know
This is
him
this
from Star
random
Wars.
dude whose name I haven't even committed to memory yet.
Yeah, like I think I mentioned it in my review that like the main problem people tend to have with Rogue One is the character development, and I think this is kind of
Mhm.
gone the other direction with that, where we are
Totally.
getting a lot of those characters properly developed and a lot of the motivations and
Mhm.
even for the villains, where like Karn is a villain, but
Yep.
we're kind of getting insight into where he's coming from, why he's doing what he's doing, and why he's such a corpo simp.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, you can't go too far one way or the other. Like for one, he's pretty much so for those who haven't watched the show, I don't know why you're watching this, but he's pretty much hunting Cassian because at the beginning, Cassian, who's in his messy bitch era, um,
Does
kills
Cassian
Tukov.
ever leave that era though? Like we know where he's
Yeah,
going from here, and it's
arguably not. but like Cyril's right to hunt him down. One thing that I liked is after Cassian kills those two men, the chief investigator, Cyril's boss, he seems like he's not really engaged, but he pretty much figures out immediately what happened.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, these two guys harassed somebody and they got what was coming to them. And, is that's street justice for sure, but Cyril doesn't see that as actual justice. And you know what? He's probably right. So we're kind of in an interesting spot where by the end of the third episode, you really feel for him because he's watched his whole squad get fucking annihilated when he believes he's doing the right thing. But you also know that he's also helping prop up these corpo fascist, like,
Yeah.
these people who are really, and you can see this in the scene when they're going through town. The people don't like them for a good reason. They murder somebody, they arrest people out. Like there's no, they're not a nice gang. So
Yeah.
he's an interesting character because he's a bit of both.
He's also willfully ignorant of the stuff that his superior is pointing out. Like, I forget what his name is, but like you said, his read on the situation was entirely right. But Karn is just so unwilling to acknowledge the fact that, like, maybe we're partially responsible for this, and seeing the institutional problems with Preox Morlana, and that none of that ever factors in. Like, he's looking to get justice against Cassian, but he doesn't seem in any way aware of the fact that, like, what they were doing in the first place was wrong, and he kind of sweeps that under the rug himself. So he's ignoring parts of that himself. It's not just that he's the only one that actually wants to do anything about this. It's that he's one of the ones that is so blinded by his belief in this institution that he doesn't realize that if it were really justice, he would be going after them as well. It wouldn't just be going after Cassian.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's kind of got like the thin blue line mentality going, where it's like it was my brothers who were killed. When a matter of fact, when you see how he interacts with other people, he probably imagines there being this big camaraderie, but he's obviously not great. Like there's that one scene in the hallway where those guys come up behind him and like he just doesn't act naturally. Like he's clearly an anxious person, or he's not great at interacting with people. There's also the scene where he's on the Tapcaf carrier or whatever, and he's obviously kind of not comfortable in the role he's in. So yeah, quite interesting.
Yeah, like this is clearly the first place that he's been that has kind of invested some power in him or some acceptance of him, and he's just rolling with that.
Yeah, totally.
But, so if Tim hadn't died, would you say that people were being too harsh on him? I'm not sure if you've seen different stuff from me, but
I just okay, for one, I kind of see where Tim came from, but the problem is he was motivated by jealousy.
Yeah.
So Tim's got his cutie pie GF Bix, and he essentially reports Cassian to. I mean, there's a couple of factors here. For one, he reports her to these corpo police officers that everyone fucking hates. So he probably realizes he's doing the wrong thing. And he does it not because he thinks Cassian is a violent criminal, which he probably doesn't care about. Maybe he does care about protecting Bix, but at least part of it is because he's also jealous. So he's doing something that's like, I don't think you can say it's fully wrong, but I mean, narking to the fucking corpos is not great. The fact that he's doing it for the wrong reasons makes it a lot worse. But he's not like he's a human. Like he's not an irredeemable piece of garbage or anything. Like I think he's pretty clearly a good guy at some level. Like he's not sure what to do. He obviously cares about Bix a lot. He gets killed trying to save her essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like the motivation there and the thing he's doing both seem to be entirely for the wrong reasons, up until he kind of redeems himself by trying to save Bix. Where
that's fair.
He doesn't really know or care what he's going to be bringing on to everyone when he reports Cassian or what they're looking for. Like there's no, if there was some element of him that was thinking, oh, Cassian could be dangerous and I'm saving people by getting rid of him, then at least that's that'd be probably kind of legitimate, because Cassian is he's not the safest person to be around or to work with, and people everywhere seem to have a bit of a grudge against him.
He's a mooch. He's like a total mooch. No one likes him.
Yeah, but there doesn't seem to have been any reason to believe that Tim was thinking, oh, I'm getting this danger to public safety off the streets. It's entirely just, oh, I think Bix might be cheating on me, and I can get rid of the guy that I'm afraid of doing that with.
I think that's fair, but I do think he also realized that, like, because he sees the message that the corpos put out, and I believe it even says double murder and everything. And maybe he wasn't worried about Cassian hurting Bix, like, physically, but I think he might have been worried about her getting caught up in something.
Okay, fair enough. But we do know he kind of redeems himself later by joining the Resistance and flying that fighter in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, totally.
That is the same actor. Is it Rise of Skywalker? It's got to be. He plays a fighter pilot in one of the sequel trilogy movies.
I didn't know that.
There you go.
There you go. But yeah, so again, interesting character. You can't say he's pure evil, I don't think, but you can definitely say he did seriously the wrong thing.
Yeah, and all the characters are acting on these complex motivations. No one's a pure saint or a pure villain. I think that's a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it starts with Cassian killing someone execution style behind a brothel, so...
Well, we gotta keep in tune with Rogue One, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember that, obviously, that other show starts, I was like, holy shit, they're really going there. Like, right off the bat, just shooting someone, not quite in cold blood, but, execution style, close range, just shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, blasters have stun settings. And one thing that I like, too, is he spends so much time trying to fucking make this backstory for himself. Like, he goes up to his buddy, he gives the droid lies, all these things, and it's meaningless. Like, he's got no clue what he's doing. So he probably didn't really need to shoot that guy because it was a game over anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that.
Which all just raises the question of why Luthen thinks he's so damn special.
Yeah, I think there's something. I think that there's pretty clearly something else going there. Like, I think there's gonna be some more backstory behind Luthen and maybe Andor's father, who, like, whether his biological father or his adopted father. I don't know. There's something interesting going on there, though.
Yeah. So we know Marva and the other guy who rescued Cassian were Guerrera's people.
Do we know that?
Wasn't that what they said on the ship? Didn't they mention Saw when they found him?
I don't know. I didn't hear that. Chat, did they mention that?
I thought
it's possible.
The guy said
I
something about like Saw giving them some information or whatever. And that I thought that was how they knew to be there or to go there.
I'm not sure. I think there's some interest. Let's just talk about this scene. That scene kind of in general, or let's just talk about the flashbacks in general, because you can kind of split that up from the main story. I'm just trying to reach out to see if anyone's touched on that. But okay, so we go back to Cassian's homeworld, Kenari, right? First of all, what's up with these fucking kids? What do you think's going on there?
I mean, they're just scouting around having a good time. Weren't you a kid before?
Yeah, I was. But so Kenari is an interesting planet. There's a few things we know about it. For one, there doesn't seem to be very many people there. And for two, there's records of some Imperial mining disaster, which Imperial mining disaster usually means it's anything but a mining disaster.
Yeah, Alderaan was an Imperial mining disaster.
Asteroids that the Death Star was tested on. The thing that's interesting, though, is there is a giant mine there. My guess is that Cassian and the other children on the planet were probably the children of the initial miners there, and then something happened to them and they're kind of left to fend on their own.
Well, do we know their families aren't there? I know we've only really seen the kids, but it seems like... I don't think it's a Lord of the Flies situation where it's just the kids. I think the parents were probably just off screen.
I kind of think it is a Lord of the Flies situation, but we don't know either way. We don't know either way. The fact that the kids went and we never see any adults, and the mine seems to be in disrepair. Kind
But
of makes me think Lord of the Flies.
if it was just like the descendants of the miners who were just left alone within the last few years, it seems like they've made a distinct enough culture that I don't know that kids would just develop that in 2 years.
I don't think we know that they developed that language though. Like that could have been the language of the colonists, I think.
Yeah, but like if it's a mining company coming in, it wouldn't be or like an imperial mine. I guess it wasn't the Empire yet. It was the Republic and CIS.
Right.
But you wouldn't expect it to be like a monoculture with just one other planet's worth of people brought in, and then all the parents leave and the kids are left behind. Like I feel like
that's a good point. I if anything, I think maybe that would have been done for simplicity's sake, but it's definitely possible there's still adults there. There's just a few the few things that I noticed where all the kids had like repurposed, like Cassian's got like he's got his shoes held up by like repurposed things. They've all got repurposed weapons. But I guess there could be parents there.
yeah, because like, is this mining disaster a thing that's happened and that's why those mines are abandoned, or is the mining disaster like just a cover up for the chemical weapons that were just dropped on the planet with this ship?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So my theory, I've had a couple of theories. For one, there's an obvious discrepancy that I remember I asked you about before the episode even went live. It's called a Republic ship. The officer is stated by Marva to be a Republic officer. Yet, when you look at the uniform, they clearly have the CIS roundel on their shoulder and on their little breather.
So I think I don't think it's called a Republic ship. They say a Republic ship is coming. So I think that like the other stuff is still true, but I think the only ship I remember being talked about was one that was still on its way.
Okay, fair enough. So I've got a few ideas. I honestly didn't. The first time I watched it, I didn't notice how present the gas is, and I was like, I saw them all yellow. I was like, are these aliens? But when you watch it back clearly, for one, the only one that survives is a guy that had a face mask on.
Yeah.
And the ship is leaking gas the same color as as their skin. So I mean, obviously, it's some sort of. The thing that had me really interested is Marva comes in wearing a gas mask. Now, it's possible that in Star Wars, like when ships crash, it's just there's so many chemicals in them that it's just really common. But I'm kind of wondering, my theory is that this could be like the very early days of the Empire, and they're setting up some sort of false flag to make the CIS look like to just further vilify aliens or whatever else. So they crash a ship. It's whether it's a Republic ship or not, they've got the CIS officers. So like I think the Empire could use that for whatever reason, whether to make the CIS look bad or just to kind of an excuse to shut the planet off and do whatever mining they want to do on the planet. Maybe there's kyber crystals on that planet or something, and they want to have an excuse to mine in peace without everyone looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, maybe.
And what I'm also kind of wondering is whether Marva and her gang know a little bit more than they're letting on. Like when she called, I'm wondering whether she's a separatist maybe, and whether she knew that it was a separatist officer and she just lied to Cassian, because I believe, was there not lore that said Cassian's family was in the separatists before?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering whether like she just didn't want this kid that she's basically stealing to think that the separatists had just crashed a bioweapon or whatever, a chemical weapon on their planet.
I don't know. I got the sense that she was talking more to the other dude at that point and was like aware that Cassian couldn't really understand her anyway.
That is a good point.
I don't think she was really trying to lie to him. And like her concern seemed to be like they definitely knew what was going on, because she knew if we don't take this kid, he's going to die with the rest of this planet, and there's nothing we can do for them, but at least we can maybe steal or we can maybe save Cassian. Because like it doesn't seem like Marva is acting in any way maliciously. Like she does seem to be genuinely concerned about Cassian, even after a lifetime of him being like kind of an ungrateful little shit. But
I think there's obviously something, like, people are saying, oh, it's a costuming mistake. It's obviously not a costuming mistake. Like, they could fix that. They could have fixed that in post if they wanted to. Like, a million people watch these things. Everyone knows what the Republic logo looks like. It looks just like the Imperial one, basically. I rewatched it with what's it called?
Subtitles?
Descriptive audio. The opposite of subtitles, descriptive audio.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I was like, will they call it a CIS logo? And they don't. They say it's a hexagon? They say hexagon logo, and they really focus on the gas a lot. But yeah, there's definitely kind of a conspiracy, which I think we're going to learn more about.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
If this was some sort of kind of plan the Empire had put in place to fuck over the planet or do whatever else, which is kind of what I'm thinking right now, that would explain partially why Cassian hates the Empire so much. Because even at this point, like in episode 3, he talks about how he's already been doing little things to hurt the Empire.
Yeah.
But it could also just be that he lives under a kind of shitty regime. So
yeah. Well, we also don't know how long it is before he and Marva get to Ferrix to actually live there. So
yeah,
I do feel like the reason we're getting the flashbacks is to kind of set up this inciting incident for why he does hate the Empire and why he kind of is the way he is. So we'll have to see as we go through the series.
Yep.
You want to talk a little bit about some of the Easter egg stuff? How did you feel about how those are handled so far?
Thought it was good. Yeah, it was good. I saw lots of things that, kind of helped root me in the universe. Lots of familiar droids. Like, there's a Gonk droid at one point. There's lots of nice kind of details. Like, I'm pretty sure the ship that Cassian kind of hides out in the junkyard is the same transport that takes him away from his homeworld, which I thought was a nice detail. There's lots of ships in the scrapyard. Like, I think they've been used unobtrusively where they belong.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah, there's been a ton of stuff that's and there's more coming in the next episodes.
Yeah.
That are like pretty deep pulls that like you might not even know. So I was watching all the episodes with subtitles on, and there was a bunch of stuff that, like, I looked up any term that was used, and there was a bunch of stuff that was like a reference that I wouldn't have recognized without looking it up. So stuff that's never been referenced since it was introduced in a source
Cassian
book.
ship.
Yeah. There was like the ship names that were dropped with like the Orlean class, like the 2 options that the guy gave for what he could have been flying. Those were pulls. There's the name of the star path comes from iJedi, or like that one is possible. It's just a coincidence, but I feel like considering how much else was a reference of that kind of name, that seems.
What
like
do you think the star path actually is? Is it like location of nearby ships?
I think it's a nav computer with like some pre-programmed destinations and stuff in it.
Okay.
Because that's what a star path was like when it was introduced in iJedi. It was the nav computer for the Errant Venture.
I really don't remember that part. Is it just mentioned once or twice?
Yeah, it was just once when they've got like, I think it was a technician on the ship talking about the ISD,
everything that's busted,
and then it's just like, oh yeah, we got the the star path navigator in here. It's standard on like then there's like the Wobani run bending Chob's knob, but without the knob, which I'm kind of pissed off about.
Yeah.
So all these little references that have come through. I think the 3rd episode had nothing that I picked up on, at least, but the junkyard, you had a little ghost in it. You had
every ship in the junkyard you can pretty much notice, which I thought was cool. And which also makes sense. I mean, there's no these shows are expensive. If you can save money by using an existing ship or whatever, do it.
And then some nerds on the internet will be really happy about it, like me.
Yeah. I also really I thought the special effects in this were really, really impressive. Yeah. I kind of alluded to on our preview episode one scene that if it were in Kenobi would have looked awful, but didn't in this. And that was the one where he sabotages the drop ship and it crashes into the tower. That I just couldn't help thinking of that fucking snowspeeder scene from Kenobi and how kind of awful that looked and how good this looked. Not to shit on Kenobi unnecessarily, just kind of the difference I think is noteworthy. But yeah, lots of really nice details, like the way when they finally find Luthen's ship, the way it like opens up and like kind of just expands like it's ready for takeoff was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed lots of really cool details on the kind of drop pod transport when it comes out of hyperspace, like the pods all start venting. It's just really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Really, really well done. And better than the special effects, because for a TV show, I'm willing to kind of give the special effects a bit of leeway. The directing was really good, I thought, and the production.
Yeah, like my big thing with Kenobi, like I don't think I would have minded any of the special effects. Like some stuff did look a little bit silly, but more of that was just Leia walking under the trench coat.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
and like my biggest problem with the look in Kenobi was that you couldn't really see anything. Like when I was putting together some of the clips, like I was looking for some of the Kenobi footage that I still had saved, and the only way I was able to find it from the thumbnails in my big library of recorded shit was trying to find whichever thumbnail just looked like a black square.
Yeah.
And that was but this, even the night scenes, you can see everything. I love it.
Yeah, and the action sequence as well was like significantly better. Like that's one thing that, like, okay, this is really showing the difference. And I don't know why, but it's just overall, like the way it's not just Kenobi either. Like the dialogue that you mentioned earlier is much more competent, not only in delivery but also just in how conversations are presented than things like The Mandalorian. Like The Mandalorian is probably my favorite Star Wars show. But that's, I think every few episodes there's always like a moment where like they could have done that better when it comes to dialogue. Whether it's a Peli Motto scene, there was a waitress in season 1 that was weird. Even the first guy in season 1, and this has had none of that so far, which is a lot more similar to a movie.
I mean,
but it's only 3 episodes in.
The Mandalorian stuff also tends to go more for like a prequel feel and explicitly more established Star Wars style for that, where a lot of the dialogue ends up just being kind of exposition to get you to the next action sequence, or just like necessary world building stuff. So I think part of it just comes from that, where you can't kind of have the conversation flow how a conversation would for its own sake when you need to hit these 3 points. It is kind of weirder when you have characters that are just coming in and saying something to fill the scene. But I have seen some people saying like, "Oh, this is why we just shouldn't use the volume unless it's very specific purposes." But I don't think that's a fair take either. Like, I don't think you can look at Mando season 1 and even a lot of Mando season 2 and say, "Oh, this just looks bad," because it doesn't. I think people are over-indexing on some of the outcomes with Kenobi, which I think was like a newer crew working with it that had less experience with it, as well as some things in Book of Boba Fett that were, I think, more down to execution than just the fact that, oh, this was CGI or the volume.
Yeah, like the volume is mostly the environment.
Yeah.
Obviously that affects, especially if you're not used to working with it, like that affects how you frame things. But like if you look at the Book of Boba Fett, the environments in that show are phenomenal. I would argue at some points they're better than Kenobi. Kenobi's very good, or sorry, better than Andor. Andor's very good, but it's just been a bit more limited so far. So, and like I agree. I never felt like Boba Fett was ever let down by the volume, to be honest. Like if you talk about the one scene people point to is the speeder chase, that wasn't a volume issue, at least as far as I know. I'm not an expert in it, but that's also a pretty rare, like chases are definitely a thing that happened in Star Wars, but it's not, the ordinary use case for the technology. So yeah, I agree. I think the volume offers a lot, and I don't like on TV, if you don't use the cutting edge technology, you're always going to limit yourself, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. Like Andor has so far had a lot of, it's been helped by the fact that it is on a planet that you can reasonably get by with practical sets a bit more easily. Like I think ultimately if you stick too close to that, you end up with one of the complaints that there was about Mandalorian season 2, with the Tython stuff, where it looked like they just went onto a kind of
Yep.
foresty mountain somewhere and filmed what was supposed to be this iconic location.
Yep.
And when you don't know what the location is, it's just supposed to be a backwater planet. Sure. But once you start getting into stuff that's a bit more built up or a bit more established, I think the volume provides one of the easier ways to be able to reasonably do that. So we'll see how other planets end up looking later on.
Yeah.
If they, because we know they're going to a few, but
Yeah, we've at least seen Coruscant and a grass planet from the trailer, and the water planet with the big thing in the like those are also. I mean, Coruscant usually they'll probably not even use the volume or practical, so it's probably just use a regular green screen. But
like I think it's a situation where they're definitely going to have to get used to the technology. The technology definitely has to grow, but that's always been what Lucasfilm does. Where sure, there's stuff you can go back. There's a lot of stuff in the prequel trilogy, especially before any kind of upgrades, that look kind of messy, but George Lucas doing that stuff is how we kind of got to the place where we can have special effects now to look back and say, hey, that looked kind of weird. So someone's got to take that risk. And especially with the TV show, I'm never really mad if the risk doesn't always work out perfectly. Even just the progression we saw between Mando season 1 and season 2 was phenomenal.
You're right. It's not just like a little bit distracting. If you watch Revenge of the Sith, the clones look like shit. They look even worse in episode 2 because they're fully digital. And then there's also Jar Jar. But without that, then we don't have all the characters, all the fully digital characters we have now. So
Marvel doesn't exist.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we want? I guess. Anything else we want to talk about plot wise? Any major plot lines we want to hit on?
I'm trying to think. I really like the ending montage that ended episode 3. That was people have been talking about that a lot. Kind of unlike anything that's been in Star Wars before. Very well crafted. Nice to have music that felt not like Star Wars, but still, worked perfectly, which was nice. Because sometimes I feel like for some of the TV shows, it's like the music falls into almost like Kenobi. I thought felt a bit too generic. Mando had its theme, which stood out on its own. But like a lot of times when things really need a hit, they go back to the original music. So I'm glad that we got the same guy that did the soundtrack for what's that show? The
show about in Philadelphia.
No, I mean I don't know if he did that too, but Succession, which has the very famous theme song. So I'm not surprised he's knocking it out of the park so far.
Like we didn't talk too much about Luthen and the plot line of like Cassian getting picked up there. I don't know that there's too much to say quite yet. Especially because we can't necessarily speculate on stuff.
Overall, great episodes. Great 3 episodes. I'm glad they released all 3 at once, and very excited for what. So that's what it's 12 episode season, right?
It is a 12 episode season coming out every Wednesday at 3 a.m. Eastern.
Cool.
What are your thoughts on the release time stuff?
I think it's so dumb. I mean, if they have to release it like that because they can't handle the server load, okay. Like if that's just the reality, all right. But if that's not the reason, I think it makes no sense. Like I think back to shows like The Walking Dead, which were, big blockbuster TV shows. And one of the big things about them is that everyone would watch them together. And there'd be so much, like everyone would be talking about it the next day. Obviously, things are a little different now where these are streaming things. But like this is the same thing that Game of Thrones does. They release I haven't been watching the show, but from my understanding, they've released the show on their cable and then on streaming at the same time. And it's like a big thing.
Yeah.
And you can tell on Twitter anytime a new Game of Thrones episode comes out. Same with like Better Call Saul, whatever else. Because Twitter blows up about it. But with Andor, you have like it releasing it's not convenient for people in the UK. It's not convenient for people in Canada. I guess it's convenient for some people in Eastern Europe or Asia or Australia. But for the majority of the fan base, it's not a good time, especially because it's right in the middle of the week. So you're killing all potential hype, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I do think the server load thing is probably the reason. And it's not that like Disney can't afford more servers. I just think having
Mhm.
the upspin and downspin so much on such a limited basis is probably not something they've so far deemed worth it. I do kind of hope that changes,
Mhm.
but it's always going to be hard to find a time that works for everyone anyways, so
That is true, and people are like, people have accused me of coming at this from an American perspective. I'm not American, I'm Canadian, but close enough. But like, I don't really think that that's the case. I just, for one, I'm like, I just, it doesn't make sense. I like whether you're American or in Europe. I don't think the release time makes sense.
yeah. Like Charlie works with us from the UK, and while his sleep schedule mostly doesn't exist, like
Mhm.
I don't think he's thrilled about having an 8 a.m. release either. I don't know that that works out
No,
super well for people in Europe.
yeah, I think like thinking of an ideal time. I think like maybe 8 a.m. Eastern time would be,
Yeah,
or 8 p.m. Sorry, Eastern time would be okay, because then in it's late in Europe, but it's not like, you know, super late. And on, even on PST, it's after. And even if you move it to like 7 Eastern time or 9 Eastern time, even midnight Eastern time would be better, I think. Because right now I don't think it's working for anyone. Somebody also gave me what I think was a stupid comment, like not everyone is as terminally as online as you. It's like, or as us. I'm like, okay, but people are used to like miss it, like watch it or you miss it style with TV
yeah,
shows. I think people like watching TV shows when they come out.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Oh well, maybe someday it'll change.
yeah. Do you want to talk about the YouTube stuff?
Yeah. So I'll be back in a second if you want to lay that out, and I'll be like 30
Okay,
seconds.
yeah. So, and for one, this is also going to sound like complaining, but this isn't my purpose. So one thing that a lot of us have noticed, whether on YouTube, on TikTok, on whatever other MySpace social media platforms that exist, is that Andor is really underperforming. I put in a video today that's doing okay. Excuse me, but just across the board, everyone's Andor uploads are doing really poorly, and for me, it's kind of concerning that, like, a concerning perhaps reflection on the level of fan interest. Like, I look at Heavy Spoilers, for example. He's one of my buddies. He runs a channel all about kind of covering recent releases and stuff. His Game of Thrones videos, 300,000 views or more. When he does Squid Game, like that gets like millions of views, 20 million views for one video. His Andor premiere video, first 3 episodes, did 30,000 views. And his episode for She-Hulk, episode 6, the recent one, which was like a wedding episode, um, was at like 70K in a few hours. So there's something going on. A few people have also pointed out, and I'm seeing it in chat a couple times as well, that YouTube is having issues with comments right now. So I've noticed that lots of videos aren't getting their comments, but there does seem to be something going on interest wise in Andor, and it's a little concerning. Like if you look at the top performing videos for Andor for the week, it's really really concerning. Like it's like the like X clips, like my clips channel I do is got most of them, and most of them are like under 100,000 views. That's really not good for a new. Like usually when a new show comes out, you get these big channels like Heavy Spoilers or like new rock stars, or the YouTubers like Star Wars Theory. They'll put out a video on the premiere, it'll get 1 million plus views, and videos now are getting like 30 or 40,000. So I'm a little concerned, but I'm curious about Corey's thoughts.
Yeah, my clips, because the channel is still kind of growing, the Andor stuff has gotten more views than the other clips that I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
But on here on Datapad, the review, I've never had like a huge review audience, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't even beating some of the other lowest performing stuff. So I don't know if you've addressed this already, but we'd as YouTubers we'd get accused of thinking like, oh well, no one we're only thinking of it from in terms of like how it impacts us, but that's not really the point. Like it's
Yeah, I
not,
don't
oh,
really care.
you need to watch we're not saying you need to watch YouTube Star Wars YouTube or you don't care about Andor or whatever. It's
No.
that you can kind of gauge a little bit of interest based on how stuff is performing relatively. Like if
Mhm.
you look at how our channels were doing around the release of The Rise of Skywalker and Mando Season 1, those were huge boosts, not just to the content about the movie and the show, but to everything, and the movie and the show outperformed it. But here, there's been kind of neither of that, and maybe part of it is like an overall fatigue. Maybe part of it is less interest in this in particular. But it's hard to really say.
Yeah, it's like when Mando season 2 comes out, I get shit in a rag and it would get 200,000 views. It's just because people are so hyped up and they want to consume as much, kind of material around the thing they're enjoying. Now, part of it is definitely the fact that Andor is a different type of show, but that's not the full explanation because if the Sopranos came out and was there was YouTube, people would do lore videos on the Sopranos and they would do extremely well. It's not necessarily only about kind of the quality of the show. I do think there's probably an issue with marketing. Like I put today a post about like just kind of saying what I've been talking about now, and so many people are saying I didn't even realize the show was out, or it's not something I feel like I've got to rush to. um it's a bit of a shame because it is such a quality show. Um, I wonder whether it was kind of the marketing that's failed.
Well, I have a limited amount of friends who care about Star Wars
Mhm.
in the first place, so I don't have like the best focus group to run this by. But like my uh, a couple of them do watch most of the shows, and after Kenobi and even like Mando season 2, one of them was like just he wasn't planning on watching Andor, partially because he didn't care about Andor as a character. But he's said he's going to watch it just because I was so positive on it.
Mhm.
So maybe there will be more people going back to it after the kind of reception. It'll be maybe a bit of a slower burn. But
Yeah.
I do think there has been more done to advertise the show than the other ones, even if I don't agree
Mhm.
with the idea that like this is the first thing that's been marketed correctly. Like I don't think there was much marketing around Kenobi. I'd agree with that take, but I don't think like Mando was ever really suffering for it.
Mm.
But I do think people feel a little bit burned after Kenobi, even on the uh, whatever angle their criticisms were coming from.
Yeah.
Like there was the unreasonable amount of criticism for really stupid reasons, but there was also legitimate criticism of reasons people wouldn't enjoy the show.
Yeah. I think I mean, that's fair. I was like, to be honest, I was not excited for Andor really. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I live and breathe this stuff until I saw the trailer. So I can definitely see how this could be kind of under the radar for a lot of people. Hopefully word of mouth helps carry it. Plus the fact that so many people have Disney Plus and, will log on and will eventually, we'll see it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
And that
just,
is a good point from chat, from Jedi of Chicago, saying that right now there is House of the Dragon, Rings of Power. There's a lot to compete with at the moment. So there's a lot of things pulling at people's interest.
yeah, I was going to mention that as well. That's a great point. I think they were probably smart to delay because um, I think Game of Thrones is getting like absolutely monster numbers,
Mm-hmm.
especially. So they were probably smart to delay it.
Yeah.
But, but yeah, I kind of wonder whether if they had been not more confident, but if this had been kind of a show with a bit more like general appeal, whether it would have been a December release like Mando usually is.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Or if this had been the kind of production quality that Kenobi had had.
Yeah, seriously.
But well, we'll see if that changes over the course of the season. It is a longer season, so maybe there'll be more pickup as things go on.
Yep.
Uh, but do you want to do maybe questions first and then do some quick thoughts on episode 4?
Sure.
All right. Then people can listen to this and they can not have to worry
Yeah.
about skipping around.
Yep.
All right. So our first question came from Joel last week, who says, one of the reasons for the Empire's quick fall in canon doesn't bother me as much is because I feel in canon the Empire is more of a brittle and weaker regime than in Legends. The Empire in canon feels like a paper tiger and lacks the deep-rooted humanocentric support in the core worlds that Legends seem to give it and is only being held together through coercion and brute force. What do you guys think? Is the Empire in canon portrayed as a paper tiger, a regime that, while on the surface seems strong, is quite weak? Love to hear your thoughts and love the podcast as always.
I honestly think we should maybe save this one again another week until after we read Lost Stars. But um, yeah, I don't really know. I don't know if I'd fully agree with that. I think there was like, because like one thing in Legends that happened was, you know, all the Imperial groups split up and you get all these different warlords fighting with each other. That hasn't happened to the same extent in canon, so hard to say really. It's just I think there's more kind of just I think the New Republic just beats them more in that 1 year before Jakku, and some of that's also kind of planned. You know,
Yeah.
Palpatine planned some of that. So I think that's kind of the main difference, more than a lack of core support or anything like that.
Yeah, like there's still a lot of those same elements that made the Empire at its height as strong, but Palpatine does kind of hollow everything out on his way out so that the New Republic isn't going to be in the same place infrastructurally or institutionally to fight against the First Order or the Final Order later. So
Yeah,
I think that's more the difference rather than uh, the Empire itself being weaker.
yeah. I mean, in both cases, they're not designed to survive without a big head of state. So
Yeah. Our next question comes from Matrix, who says, "This is kind of a dumb question, but I was reading one of your tweets, Zach, joking about how Andor has a swear word. That got
hmm.
me thinking, why does Star Wars seem to censor and use subtitles for words most of the time? I get they want to stay with a PG-13 rating, but the Marvel films have that same rating consistently throughout the movies and seem to be less shy about the amount of words they let by. Well, in Star Wars, the most we hear is a hell and a damn and almost shit from Lando and Solo before it's cut off."
um, I just think swearing takes away from like what Star Wars has gone for in the past. Not with Andor. I just think Star Wars is usually supposed to be a space opera. It's not like I don't think swearing is necessarily a big part of that.
Yeah.
I don't think it adds to that feeling. I think with like Marvel, they're supposed to be action movies, not gritty certainly, but sometimes they're supposed to be a little bit edgy or a little bit like, oh, this is
Mhm.
badass. So I think the swearing serves the purpose a little bit more than it does for Star Wars.
Yeah. I think the core audience, even though the rating is ultimately PG-13, I do think Star Wars at its core is aimed at younger groups though too.
Hmm.
Where Marvel, you're probably looking at people who are a couple years older as your core group. And I think that influences those choices a fair bit.
Yeah, like my son loves Star Wars,
Yeah.
and I think like, and the difference is, if my son were going to get into Marvel, and he's not really, he wouldn't watch the Marvel movies. He'd watch like Kid Spider Man or something.
Hmm.
I kind of I think where like when my son, when he wants to watch Star Wars, he usually wants to watch like one of the movies with Darth Vader in it. So I think that's kind of partially the difference.
Yeah, like my nephew, I think is a year older than your son, and
Hmm.
he's a big superhero kid. That's kind of his go-to thing. He's not really a Star Wars fan, and I don't think he's ever seen a Marvel movie. I probably wouldn't let him watch a Marvel movie if I was watching him,
Yeah.
and I don't think my sister and my brother-in-law do either. And I don't think he'd really understand it or like it that much if he did. So I think there is kind of that few-year divide that.
Hmm. Totally.
Which isn't to say, and whenever people say like, "Oh, Star Wars is for younger kids," that doesn't mean that adults can't enjoy it, and there's not stuff in there that are primarily geared towards adults that kind of gets past the radar. But ultimately, Star Wars is a franchise and set of movies for kids. Is a franchise and set of movies for kids.
Hmm.
So that's not a knock on it. That doesn't mean it's bad, but that's kind of just what they're going for.
Hmm.
We did get a question from Tristan that I think is more NJO related, so we'll hold that for Star by Star.
Several weeks. Yeah.
Hostile Nebula asks, seeing the way that Timothy Zahn wrote Thrawn's strategies in his various works and how intricate some of them are, do you think that he's somewhat tactically smart in that respect? So I don't think
Timothy Zahn.
so. I don't think like a lot of the stuff Thrawn does, if you really examine it, doesn't make sense. I think in his later books it makes a bit more sense, but like if you started picking away at it, there'd be holes. It's just when you're writing a book, you get to present this kind of just so story where things go the way things go, and like
Yeah, no, I just think he's clever. Like like Timothy Zahn is obviously clever, and he invents it. Like he probably, he invents the situation and the response at the same time. So
Yeah. Like it's the same way that people Monday morning quarterbacking in sports are able to say like, "Oh, well,
yeah,
I would have done this and it would have worked out." Like, okay, if you just leave that unexamined, then fine. But
yeah,
if it were a real situation happening, a lot of what Thrawn does, especially in the Thrawn trilogies, he pulls the answers out of nowhere. There's no way he really could have figured out the stuff that he was saying, which is why like there's some of the fan theories of like him getting his information from a secret source and then just fucking with Pelion for the rest of the time.
yeah,
But
yep, totally.
it's more just author tricks than anything
Mhm.
indicating that Zahn should be a 4-star general, in my opinion.
Agreed.
All right, thank you, Nebula. Next up, we have Attila the Hun, uh, famous dictator. Thank you for asking. How traumatized did you feel after Fest was mentioned as Cassian's
Ugh.
fake home planet? I'm guessing Justin in particular was mumbling incomprehensibly about ATPTs for hours.
Yeah, well, I had known that was his, because that was kind of something they had to deal with, because Fest was in his in a past lore that was his home planet. I thought they dealt with that perfectly. But yeah, fuck Fest. All I think about is Cassian growing up, just to see these snow speeders just respawning and trying to fucking beat the same mission again over and over and over. Just miserable shit.
So that's his origin story. That's why he hates the Empire. They kept making
Yeah,
him play that mission.
exactly. Kind of respect it. Fast, for those who don't know, it's a planet. It's like it had an Imperial research base on it. They steal ATPTs from it in the Rogue Squadron game. It's one of the most miserable levels in that game, which has some very difficult levels.
Yeah, and Justin, of course, has an irrational hatred for the ATPT.
We'll talk
Completely
about that off
unfounded.
stream. We'll talk about that off stream.
Thank you,
Thing
Attila.
can't even look left and right, but that's all right.
Well, yeah. Have you ever heard of analysis paralysis, Justin?
I have not. No. Is that
If
when
you
there's too much information?
if you have too many options you could go for, you end up freezing. You don't make a decision. The ATPT has very cleverly set it up so that the pilots can't make a choice.
I'm
They
not even
go
sure
forward.
I'm not even sure how the ATPT turns, if I'm being honest.
It kind of does a shuffle. Have you ever had like
So like one leg doesn't go forward as much as the other one, basically. But doesn't that, because its hips, like it only, like its joints don't, it doesn't have ball joints. It only has the what's it called? I forget what those kind of joints are called, the up and down ones. So I'm not 100% sure how it
it
actually
can
turns.
turn? Like it's the same thing as if you had a stiff neck. You needed to turn.
But
I think it
I
has the
st-
same range of motion.
but I don't know.
Look, it walks forward. It shoots the stuff in front of it. Easy.
It certainly tries to.
All right, next question from Christopher, who says, Dark greetings. First off, I want to say that I love the premiere of Andor. Really hyped to see the rest. My question for this week is, if Andor has near equal success to The Mandalorian, do you believe we'll see a hypothetical season 3 where the show transitions to an anthology of rebels carrying on Cassian's legacy after The New Hope, or will Disney greenlight more adult Star Wars shows in general?
The second one,
Yeah.
if one of those two.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get like a season 3 Sans Cassian. I don't think they'll like maybe they'll make more Rebel era content in the future. I do think there will probably be more shows of varied tone, some of them matching Andor more closely, and maybe
Some of them going the other way, like
yeah,
Skeleton Crew could go the other way.
yeah. I think we are going to get a broader set of Star Wars shows, and I think that's what I'd be more excited for than hearing that they're going to just make a bunch more of Andor clones.
Yeah.
And I think with the stuff that's worked out, they're probably getting more of the message of like doing these kinds of different things is what's working out the best. And I think that's what's worked out the best for Marvel. But there was so there was a really stupid leak about how Tony
We talked about this
Gilroy.
briefly, I think, last week, maybe.
We talked about it privately. I don't think I don't think it had come out when we did the podcast last week. But that Tony Gilroy had been given a first look deal for Star Wars projects with Lucasfilm. I was like, who the fuck else is he gonna pitch it?
Yeah, he's gonna take it to me, and I can have an animator do it, put it on X Clips.
So yeah, that turned out shockingly to be a fake story. I would not be surprised at all if they tried to get him on board for another project, maybe another movie that they'll never make. But
No, it's been refreshing for sure. Like I was definitely thinking about how the Rogue Squadron movie would have really worked in this style. I think maybe lighten it a little bit, but yeah.
yeah, maybe we'll see what it ends up looking like without that style someday in
Yep.
like 20 years when we get another Star Wars movie.
I'm gonna put that under the we'll see category.
All right, final email for the night comes from Joel once again saying, do you think it's fair to compare the Star Wars Disney Plus shows with each other since they're all trying to do very different things with different tones and feels? For example, Mandalorian is more of a lighthearted adventure show compared to Andor's dark and gritty political thriller. Curious to get your take on this.
I mean, I don't really know if I understand the question. Like, I think you can compare something whether they're different or not. Like, you can prefer one tone or the other. Like, I think it's a mistake to say one's objectively better.
Yeah,
But
I think
like
that's ultimately what he's getting at.
yeah, like the prequels and the original trilogy are very, very different in tone, but like that doesn't stop people from comparing them for better or for worse.
Yeah, I think like if you try to say Andor is darker and grittier, therefore it's better, I think
Yes.
that's where the comparison gets unfair.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to make the comparison for the purposes of saying how they're different or what you may prefer, that's perfectly fair. Like
Yep.
the if you point out that Andor is a bit darker,
Mm-hmm.
and the Mandalorian is a bit lighter, or Kenobi was darker in that you couldn't see anything. Those are all just the different elements of the show. Because really, if I can only really look at it or explain it from how I try to approach reviews when I do them, where I'm trying to give my opinion, but I'm not trying to put like things in an objective hierarchical ranking because I think that's a even though that's kind of what we do with our tier lists, that's not really a productive or useful thing for anyone.
Yeah.
It's more trying to say this is why I like or don't like it. These are the things that you may like or dislike about it, using the frame of reference from other shows, and hopefully give people an idea from that if it'd be a thing that they'd be interested in giving a try. So I think like comparisons that aren't geared towards that, at least from a review perspective, tend to be less useful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that yeah, it's like it's one thing when we're like we don't claim that our tier list is the be all end all of tier lists. Like so there's people who are gonna like the main trilogy. There's people who are gonna hate Plagueis. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is why we try to be clear with that of like, this is just our subjective way that we would rank these books for whatever criteria we're thinking of in the moment then.
Yeah.
Like there's no set objective criteria that we're working off for that or whatever. But, which is why I hate the fucking term objective when people try to apply that to a show being objectively good or bad or objectively better or worse. Where it just none of that works that way. That's not a useful criteria to have.
Yeah, I hate that a lot more after law school too, where it's like you spend if you ever fuck up the difference between objective and subjective, you just get booted out immediately.
But yeah, so those are our questions for the week. Thank you all for submitting them. Remember to send any questions you have for future episodes to tapcaftransmissions@gmail.com. Now,
Just give a very, very brief episode 4 preview.
So yeah, again, no spoilers, but if you don't want to hear
Yeah.
anything about episode 4, just goodbye.
Yeah, let's just each do, let's say, 2 sentences our thoughts on episode 4. Do you want to go first?
Was very good. It continues with a lot of the stuff that I liked about episode 3. It and kind of builds on that a bit more, I think. So I think it's still headed in the right direction. It is very different in that you're dealing with like a lot of the plot lines that are set up kind of close off in episode 1 through 3.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There'll be new characters, new environments. I don't think it's a surprise to hear that, considering the last shot we get is them leaving the planet. I do think people are going to complain about it being slow still.
Okay.
The people who don't like that, anyway. But for me, I thought it was good. And yeah, lots of kind of really interesting stuff done. So I think people are going to like it. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be a super controversial episode.
I agree. All right. So next week we've said Lost Stars. Are we still doing
Mhm.
Lost Stars?
I got to message Alex again and ask him. I messaged him, but he never confirmed. So we'll keep an eye on Twitter, and I'll edit it into the description on the podcast, perhaps. But yeah,
And I mean, you did just tell Mark to read it as well, so maybe we get all four of it.
yeah, that'd be fun.
And if not, so it'll probably be Lost Stars. If it's not, we'll probably just finish off the Tales of the Jedi stuff.
Tales of the Jedi, yeah.
We'll try to know as soon as possible so we can let people
Yeah.
know. I just got my copy of Lost Stars, and it's a longer book than I thought it was. But
Yeah, it's fairly long, isn't it? Yeah, no, it's pretty long because I did the audiobook and it's a good one.
All right, so that's the tentative plan. 2 weeks from now, we'll have another Andor episode, I think. We'll for the episodes that aren't explicitly about the shows, we'll still have like a few minutes.
Yeah, at the end,
but
yep.
Generally, it'll be every other episode. We'll be talking about the shows.
Everybody, thanks for watching, and until next time.